Well, thank you, Richard, for coming to speak to us. You're the Director of Evaluations for Undergraduate Medical Education. And programmatic assessment is a big feature of our new foundations curriculum. So I'd like to ask you what's the current gap is for our assessment um, in undergraduate medical education, and how are you going to address the gaps in the new programmatic assessment?
Well, our concern was that what's happening right now is that there's a lot of focus on memorizing large volumes of lecture material and then just regurgitating that on the exams. The focus becomes attaining a mark. And so you have this sort of pattern of binge and then purge. And the problem with that type of learning is it really doesn't foster any deep learning. It's not really good for promoting integration of knowledge or retention of knowledge. So we looked at using a new assessment framework. It's hard to introduce a new assessment framework without a change in the curriculum. So when we saw this change in the curriculum coming about, we thought, well, here's an opportunity to better align our curriculum with our assessment strategy. So we're hoping to fill that gap.
Okay. And what is the evidence or any theoretical background for programmatic assessment?
Yeah, so programmatic assessment is not new in general. It's been in use in the Netherlands for about 20 years. It's been growing very rapidly throughout the world. So in Australia and the United States, they're using it extensively, and other centers in Canada are taking it up now. So it's not new, but it's new to us. The reason that we think it may be beneficial is that it helps to compensate for what we used to rely on as high stakes exam having high reliability. You can replace that with low stakes exams that in of themselves don't have the same reliability, but when you aggregate all that data together, you get the same reliability and you're able to make the same high stakes decision. But the benefit is that you can then use assessment modalities that are a better matched to the material you're covering. So you have a closer match to the methods that you're using to teach with the outcomes that you're measuring, and you put all that data together to get a nice stable picture of how students are performing. The other benefit is that it allows us to shift away from assessment of learning and make it assessment for learning. And this assessment then serves a primary role of providing feedback to students. So rather than judging how students are doing and creating anxiety around performance, we use the assessments to give feedback so the students can have very personalized approaches to learning based on where their own strengths are.
Okay. So by that you mean instead of five major exams, basically five data points that we collect to see if a student would move on from one year to the next year, we're collecting a lot more data. So we have, let's say, clinical encounter forms, or we have many quizzes and exercises. What else?
Yeah, and that's exactly it. So what it allows us to do is to combine lots of types of data. So we have a broader sampling of data, but we can sample different types of data. We can have very quantitative objective data, but we can supplement that with high quality qualitative data. Mm-hmm. And that rich narrative really helps to sometimes fill in the gaps. Mm-hmm. What it means then is that we're not relying on interpretation of a simple number or a score, but rather using expert opinion to look at the student's overall performance, and not just in an individual unit, but rather overall according to specific competencies to determine whether or not they're achieving the things that they need to achieve in order to be effective physicians when they graduate.
Okay, so it's more a holistic view of how the student is performing within the year through many different activities, modalities, and assessment.
That's right, and it's a very developmental approach. We don't expect students to be at their final state at the beginning of their curriculum. So we have sort of milestones along the way where we know that what we're looking for is that students are reaching the level of competency that is expected at that stage of training, and that over the years we see the progression. And what it does is it helps us to move away from this sort of, I covered that, I'm going to forget about it and move on to the next topic. They will see that there's a value in retaining the stuff they learned early on about the basic sciences, because it will be applicable to the clinical care that they're now providing in their advanced years.
Okay. So we have faculty who are involved in developing the foundations curriculum, and we also have faculty who are teaching CBL, teaching case-based learning, teaching clinical skills, and teaching facilitating portfolio sessions. So how can these faculty be involved in programmatic assessment?
Yeah, so programmatic assessment is a big change for everyone, faculty included. the role of the faculty is going to change a fair bit. They're still going to be there as their frontline teachers, but they're now going to be taking on a new role of being mentors. They're there to help facilitate students reflecting on their own performance, to make sense of all this data that they're getting exposed to be able to formulate learning plans. So we're going to spend a lot of time through faculty development preparing our faculty for this new role so that they can approach this with confidence and help the students to develop their own personalized learning plans.
Great. Thank you very much for your time.
Oh, my pleasure.